everybody, welcome to Anatomical Gangster. I am your host, Sue Hitzman, and today I had the privilege of talking once again to Jaap van der Wal. He's an embryologist, an anatomist, a brilliant man in phenomenology, and he is somebody that I look to when I have deep questions about life itself. What is the human experience all about? I'm excited to be taking his embryo course in London the first week of March. Maybe you might want to attend that as well. You can see all the information in the show notes about this incredible 4-day event where he will be sharing his wisdom and knowledge about the embryo and its relationship to things like consciousness. And because I had registered for it, I started to think about the embryo and about my development. And I wrote him a letter that hopefully we're going to be talking about in this conversation. So I'm going to read it to you. And the question is essentially, do I, as a being coming into form, do so equipped with consciousness encoded in my DNA, or do I create consciousness? In other words, if I create my brain weeks into my development to organize all of the elements that I've already been becoming, was that initial act of forming a brain actually me expressing consciousness? To organize myself, I'll have to organize my thoughts eventually too. Is that active process actually a representation of consciousness? What do you think? Well, that was the question that I posed to Jaap for this conversation, which I hope that you enjoy and share it with your friends. If you enjoy the podcast, of course, subscribe to the channel. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jaap van der Wal. Jaap, thank you so much for coming and chit-chatting with me. Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation. I love that. I love it. All of my questions. So when
Your Christmas thoughts.
Yes, I for everybody listening, I had an existential crisis. I don't know. Sometimes I just come up with things to think about. And my thought was because first of all, Yep, I'm coming to take your course in March, of the embryo course. So I'm super excited about that. So this is really
Thank you.
kind of gonna come to that. And one of the things I was thinking about was consciousness. And I thought to myself, do I come equipped with consciousness because I'm a human being, because I am this light, because we all started as this spark? Do I come with consciousness equipped within my DNA, or is it something that I create after birth? So I think this is a great conversation. And I thought, who could answer this? And I thought, oh, Jaap van der Wal could. So I sent Jaap a long letter to which, Jaap, you were very kind to reply. So I guess the question that I would start this with, where you can then answer a lot of this, is how do you define consciousness, and what role does embryology or the embryo play in understanding it?
My return question in such discussions always is, what do you think that consciousness is? Because very much I find out that people have a wrong notion about consciousness and make it synonymous what in, let's say, decades ago was mind, soul, spirit. And that is not. Consciousness is not similar or same category as mind or soul. Consciousness is a function of your soul and your body. You want it to be a tree. Well, a tree doesn't have consciousness.
Why
It
not?
it sleeps.
But it
It
knows, like, I mean, I think that they are conscious. I think my plants are
yeah.
conscious, because when I'm
We will
not
never
here for
know
a
for
week,
sure,
they
but
all wilt. And it's not that they're not getting water, because I have an automatic water, but I think they
yeah,
miss me.
yeah. But if you go with a saw to a tree, it stands there. When you go with a saw to an animal, it will flee, or it will bite, or it will eat you. There is reaction. And in the animal, something reacts what we recognize in ourselves. And that's why we think the animal reacts with soul or consciousness or mind or whatever. That's quite acceptable, but you can never prove that. Never we can prove that.
Mm.
And the same thing is, and now I will bring you uh, to a quote that I very often use in my courses, and that's the old Rumi.
Mm.
And Rumi says, study me as much as you like. You will not know me. I differ in 100 ways from what you see me to be. Put yourself behind my eyes and see me as I see myself. You cannot, for I have chosen to dwell in a place where you cannot see. And that's the whole problem.
Yeah.
Everyone, you and me, we both experience something like consciousness or awareness or soul or mind or thoughts.
Right. It's a
But
construct, right?
but you can
We
never
define it.
you can never experience my thoughts. You may read my thoughts with a scan. Oh, he's now thinking on an apple, or he's now thinking. That's what they train patients with to guide a robot arm. They do that with their thoughts. So the thoughts are first registered as brain activity, and then the brain activity is put into a computer and translated in flexing the arm or extending the arm. But no one can ever think your thoughts.
Right.
Consciousness is a private experience. It's not something objective that you can see, measure, or make visible. That is still the bottleneck, the essential bottleneck in neuroscience. Nobody knows how, at the end, the final brain activity, when you're looking at something in your visual cortex or whatever, is transformed in the experience of consciousness that you have when you see a tree. There is still the gap. And they call it in psychology and in philosophy the reality of the first person. That's the reality as I live it, as I experience it, is different from the reality of the third person. The third person is the onlooking consciousness. I observe something. But the first person is I experience something. And there is a gap. And what we do nowadays with gaps is I use a very important word for my work, metabletics. Metabletics is that we also, as human beings, can change the reality. What do we do in mathematics? We say one is a number, one is something, zero is nothing. But we transformed zero in a number. And what we do in all our mathematics, which is hidden in all our techniques, in all our cars, in all our rockets, we approach the half of one, half of that, half of that, half of that. And then you approach so near to zero that in mathematics we make it equal. And that is a giant error in all our science about matter. The same we do on the opposite. The universe is so large. We are now approaching the beginning of the universe. We see stars that are trillions of light years old. And we tend to approach the real beginning so that it is so far away, it is infinite. So what we do, make the universe so large, so large, so large that it approaches infinity.
So, but isn't the universe itself? I mean, the universe, it's it's a construct that we define. I mean, we're the ones that kind of come up with the idea that there is a universe, right? I mean, I think that there's something there that also perplexes me over even the concepts of consciousness. If I'm an observer in the process of observation on that which is observed, I'm that's that is not necessarily consciousness, is it?
No, but we make things equal.
Right.
Make what we can describe as brain activities or whatever equal to what I experience. And that is, yeah, that's a mathematic error. You should not do that. And it's
And
impossible.
and so
That is
because when you have that error, what's the ramification of that? What does that do
well,
to
the
our understanding?
consequence is that your first sentence, if consciousness is an emergent property of complex biological system, is therefore wrong.
Ah,
It's an it's an interpretation.
well,
You
wow, you're going to piss a
interpret
whole
that
bunch of people off now.
consciousness is produced by, is sprouting from, is emerging from. So you think that the body is preeminent and that consciousness is secondary and produced by the body. That's not what Descartes said.
Gotcha.
Descartes did not say, I think, therefore I am. He said, cogito, that means I doubt. He in his book he is doubting on everything. Maybe that what I see is not real. Maybe that's what I hear is different from. So, but there's something I cannot doubt on, and that is that what is doubting in me. That is what is asking the questions. That is what is thinking in me. There must be something in me that must be the absolute polarity of my body. Otherwise, I could not know my body. That's what Rumi says. That's what Rumi says. You cannot know. There must be something in me that is absolute different and not a little bit different, no, not a tiny little bit different, very, very different from my body, my matter. So that is why Descartes said there are two dimensions in me: the ponderable dimension, the body, the matter, things, and the imponderable dimension. And the imponderable dimension is only experienceable to me,
Mm.
not to anyone else. And that's the tragedy.
So are you saying that then everything arises from consciousness? Consciousness does not arise from something the other way around.
No, that could be. That could be, of course. Everything is consciousness and we are part of a big consciousness. Could be. But when something is a polarity, it means that they are not without each other. Everywhere where there's matter, there must be mind. Everywhere where there is particle, there must be a whole. Everywhere where there is universe, there must be. I mean, mind and body are a polarity. That means an entity, a unity. They are never without each other. And that's what Descartes meant. But we made of Descartes, we thought that he said about duality, that mind is so much different from the body, it has nothing to do with each other. And then we started to study the body, and now we started to study the brain, and we come so near that experience that we have as consciousness that we make it the same. And then we say that consciousness comes from the body, but it's even possible. Maybe it's better to accept that they come out of each other,
Yeah, I
that
mean
they are one, that they
it
are one and two appearances of one. And that's what the embryo does.
yeah, I mean I kind of feel like when I hear people talk about consciousness, and we kind of said this, it's becoming more, you know, hear people are always bantering about consciousness now. It's like kind of a big topic. But are we talking about consciousness in a singularity of a person? Like I have consciousness, like I had you know, I've had conversations where we're talking about where does consciousness arise within the body, right? And is it in the microtubules of my neurons, right? And so now it's a tangible thing, and I say, is it of the body, or is it a, you know, a big sea of consciousness? Like what is it? And you know, then you can get into complexity theory and, you know, Neil Thesis work and stuff like that. So Stuart Hameroff, when I had that conversation with him, and he said to me, well, we think that consciousness originates in the microtubules because he's an anesthesiologist, and if I put
Yeah,
myself
yeah, yeah, I
under,
know.
I lose
Yeah.
consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So I guess
But
that's the thing. Yeah.
I listened to your Dr. Bush. Yeah,
Yes.
Zach Bush,
Zach Bush. Yes.
talking about the crystals
Yes.
of the water. Read this.
Living with
Living with the
fluid.
fluid genome.
Yeah.
Mei Wan Ho. Mei Wan Ho is a phenomenologist. She passed, she died 3 years ago. And she says our model of the DNA is absolutely wrong. It's ridiculous that you have a straight, long strand of molecules and that they can be cut and whatever. It is nonsense. It's a liquid crystal. It's a liquid crystal that very rapidly can constantly change its activity. And moreover, she says, in every trillion of your cells, there is the same DNA in a different state of activity.
Mm.
It's a holographic principle. Even if you would think away all the matter of your body, there would be that energy. You could see your body as an energy or whatever. And it is so interesting because what has quantum physics delivered us? That we are now able to think that an electron at the same time can be somewhere and at the same moment also moves. That space and time are polarity.
Mm.
Something is in spatial or something is time, but it is the reverse, it's the polarity of each other. And last but not least, light can be a wave and can be a particle, the photons. That's impossible. That something is a particle and as well a wave. But it is. So accept that consciousness, soul, spirit, and matter are two faces of the same.
Yeah, I liked when I was at the Lake Nona Impact
Yeah,
Forum, and I've heard people say that uh, with this concept of particles and waves, that particles are matter and waves are possibilities. So
yeah,
waves are the,
yeah,
it can be anything, right?
yeah.
And I think
The-
that that speaks a lot to how how consciousness exists. I mean, it can be it can kind of be many things, or it can be
Yeah,
in
but
different
also
places.
it also brings me back to my observation in the embryo that consciousness should not be um, uh, uh, verwisseld, exchanged, or should be not be misunderstood as spirit. I mean, um, consciousness is a function of your body and your spirit. If your body and your mind are close, you sleep. You said here that every time that you experience something, that you are rewiring your brain. That's not true. When
Mm.
do you rewire your brain after having heard Jaap van der Wal 1 hour? Tonight.
I feel like you're
You
rewiring
know,
my brain
no,
right now.
no, tonight. No, tonight. You can only do that tonight. Why? Then you sleep.
Mm.
And when you are reorganizing your brain, when you are rewiring your brain, when you have to restore all the damage that has got done all this day to your brain, because everything you see, hear, and experience gives damage to your brain. It's catabolic. It destructs the life forces in your brain. And to repair that and to rewire that, you have to sleep. And that is what the embryo shows you. In the beginning, every organ in your body, on its whole body, the embryo is sleeping. What is it doing? What is it processing? It is processing its body. But gradually there come organs where it can become awake. Brain, skins, sense organs, eyes, ears, and that are organs where you tend to die. Every time you sleep, you come again in the vitality mode. And then your soul, you as an organism, can repair and change and correct and whatever. But every time you wake up, your consciousness comes up, becomes aware. And when you sleep, your consciousness is sleeping.
Mm.
Your consciousness is not absent when you sleep. It is working in another way. It is the body shaping consciousness. We call that in German die leibschaffende Seele, the body shaping soul. But that
Mm.
same body shaping soul comes when you are thinking and seeing and hearing free as mental force or as mental activity. So
Mm.
it's the same. The same soul that rewires your brain is the same soul that is thinking in you and is awareness in you. That
That's
is all
beautiful.
polarity thinking.
Yeah.
So simple it is. And guess
Yeah.
what? Guess what? What are they looking now with they want to go further with the Webb telescope. They want to see the Big Bang. Because there in the Big Bang, for a trillion of a second, and nano small, there has been a moment in which, let's say, spirit and matter, consciousness and matter was together. And then something implodes. And then we had time and space. And with time and space, you can make a whole universe. And the same happens on conception. I will show you. Conception is not that he is fertilizing or penetrating her. Nonsense. They create for some hours a Big Bang moment, a moment in which everything is possible. And at the very moment that they confuse, the two cells disappear and come forward as two principles in your body, and that is the cellularity and the wholeness. It's an implosion, it's a Big Bang.
Mm.
And
That's
it's at,
beautiful.
at that very
That's beautiful.
beginning, mind and body come together and implode into your body.
Beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I
what a
mean, it
way.
is, it's incredible when you talk about the embryo, because I don't think that, um, even for me, I never really thought about it the way that I do now listening to you. And I remember when I read the book Embryogenesis, it's like this thick and the writing is this small. And it took me, I don't even know how many years that I went through that book. And I don't think that it's just so pragmatic or it's just so practical. But I find parts of understanding embryology very fascinating in the idea, especially when you think about the developmental points of how we are a process and we are creating ourselves. And that was one of the things I had asked you, is that if I'm if I'm formatting myself, and then some few weeks into the process I start to formulate a brain to organize the things that I've created, that to me sounds like something is conscious, like something is doing something to create the process. But but you have a different take of it. So I want you to explain your core
But we are the,
principles
yeah,
of
but
your
we are the
embryo.
process. We are the process, and we are we are the shape and the shaping at the same time. Your body is not an anatomical spatial structure. It's a process in time.
That's
Tomorrow you'll
beautiful.
wake
Yeah.
up with a new, different body.
Well, so
Eh,
how so explain a little bit of this for everybody, because I think this is important. Is what are the core principles behind your embryo course? Because I'm excited that I'm finally taking this. I've tried 3 times and there's always something comes up. And now my mother's broken her leg and I've broken my foot, and I'm still coming. There's no way I'm missing it. So talk a little bit about this embryo course and how it integrates embryology with consciousness studies, or perhaps not, but tell me a
It
little bit about
is,
it.
my message is to show the people that the embryo, studying the embryo, helps you to overcome our bloody 4 centuries old materialistic and partial thinking, thinking in parts, thinking in elements, thinking in molecules, thinking in organs. That's anatomy. That is not simply a discipline, that's a mindset. It started with the anatomist, the mindset that a whole can be subdivided in particles, form, but at the same time thinking that the whole is the construct, the result of the parts. And that is the first thing that the embryo helps you to overcome. And the second thing is that the embryo helped me to overcome my idea that the body first have to grow up and then starts to function. And then you start to have consciousness or whatever. No, every living organism is not a spatial being, it's a being appearing in time. So every living being is a process. You never are ready or not yet ready. So we are a being of mind and body from the very first second on. Like the universe was time and space from the first Big Bang on. Time did not come in later, or space did not come in later. It was there from the beginning, in the tiny, tiny, mini, mini, mini. Can you imagine? In that tiny, mini, mini Big Bang, there was the whole universe.
I mean, that's kind of amazing. I think about that too. It's like, gosh, there was a time where I was like this big, and
Yeah,
now,
yeah, yeah.
and then it really is. It is mind
You
blowing to
just
think
start
about.
with 2 millimeter.
Yeah,
It's crazy. And then you
it's
start to grow.
crazy.
And wow, you grow without limits. Your mother does not reject you. Your mother opens up and you end up somewhere in her hypophysis. Do you know how far away your pituitary gland is when you are 2 millimeters, what, 0.2 millimeter large? I mean,
Mhm.
you are without limits. You will never again be so big as in your embryo time.
So, okay, so this could be a touchy topic for some people, but we're living in a world where we've got gender identity crises. And I've heard people say, I was born in the wrong body. And I think, how can that be so? How is that possible that you're in a wrong body? And they're saying, because I'm a boy and I was born in a girl's body. And I wonder, how do we speak to something like that when I feel like the embryo is what it is? We are what we are. How do you how do you get around that?
Yeah. So the question is, how can there be disharmony
Right.
if it's always is together? Yeah, that the cause of that can be in the body. For example, a gene is wrong or whatever. Or the cause can be that you really land. I will show you in the embryo course. You land in your body. And step by step, process by process, you go deeper, deeper into that body. And it could be that the match between the soul or the spirit that incarnates is not exactly matching the body. Why? There's so many courses. I mean, we on this side of the dimension, we have condoms, we have anti-conception, we have affairs with someone else. So a lot of embarrassment is there. There's a lot to choose. There's a lot of, and maybe you land in the wrong body,
Mhm.
and that's not only about gender. I very often experience people in let's say more psychological disorders that they that it does not fit, that it does not match the body and the way they want to be, or the world or the family they live in. It's maybe it's epidemic, and maybe it's a modern epidemic.
Could we say then, because I always think to myself, I'm not my body or my mind. I'm a spirit occupying a body and utilizing a mind to have a human experience.
That's
And
right. There you are.
I'm very grateful that this is the body. I maybe would have preferred a better mind, but I do my best, but I just feel like
Yeah, yeah. That
there's
brings
maybe
yeah,
that's where the separation is.
yeah, yeah. That brings me to another, yeah, let's say essential part of my embryo course is that I gradually I make people clear that you can talk about spirit and body as a huge polarity, but every one of us is a combination, an interaction, a third dimension,
Hmm.
and that is your soul. So your soul is psychosomatic. Your soul is genes and brain, but also your thoughts and it is that it's, and of course there can be mismatching. Of course there can be, yeah, um, confrontation. But the same confrontation that can be a disorder can also be a possibility to develop,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yes.
So, and maybe, yeah, something in our modern culture happens that makes many of us, yeah, not so this makes us displaced, not in the right situation. That you do not here come empty as an empty uh, piece of paper. You come here with an intention. You come here with faculties, with possibilities, with maybe with ideas, maybe with longings.
Mm.
Of course, you can imagine that.
Sure.
So many people surprise us when they are 21 years old. Suddenly there comes another person to appearance. It took for them time to, yeah, to get in harmony with.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's a really good way to say it. So, yeah, because you had mentioned this that we in and for everybody, if you don't know who Yap is, you're hiding under a rock. But as a phenomenologist, an anatomist, an embryologist, when I've seen you, and I love it actually. When I go on Facebook and I see a post where somebody's talking about fascia, and you chime in, and then it's like a whole new conversation, and we're talking about these parts of an embryo. We talk about cells, we talk about bones and tissues, etc. How does fascia play a role in the formation of the embryo, and how does it relate to your work?
What?
Fascia.
Fascia, I met fascia for the first time in 2009. I was already for 25 years an anatomist, a regular anatomist, a medical anatomist, a regular thinker. But I discovered with my colleagues in Maastricht, we discovered that what we are doing in anatomy is cleaning up, is making things discrete, separating organs from each other. And that the best students was the student who could clean the body as clean as possible. And then we found out what would happen if we do the reverse? If we take away everything that is bone and muscle and organ, what will be left then? And then we saw that what was left there was an architecture, you know, network of connective tissue, a framework of connective tissue. And that's where I became professor of. That's my thesis is about the architecture of connective tissue. And then in 2009, I was introduced to people of fascia because Professor Huying organized the second International Congress on Fascia in Amsterdam. And he remembered, oh, Jaap, he had a thesis about connective tissue. Maybe he can bring his work here for these people. And I talked there, and I got a keynote speaker time at 1.5 hours. And they started to applaud and applaud 4 minutes because they recognized completely what they were working with, and that was fascia. And I now realize that the embryo further on taught me when I start to think in fascia, it is fascia where it starts with. Fascia is not like anatomy where it ends with. It starts in fascia. Your whole inner starts as a fascia. But then you have to broaden up your definition and not like the new article of Carla Stecco and Niels is doing, reduce it to a system of connective tissue. No, then you have to go back to the primeval fascia, and that's the mesenchyme. That is your inner tissue. That is what Blechsmith, the big embryologist, wanted to talk and said to us, don't talk about mesoderm. It's not a derm. It cannot be a derm. It is inner tissue. It's the tissue. It's the matrix. It's the fabric of your innerness. In that, you will organize your body. And exactly what the embryo is doing. Via that mesenchyme, it is creating organs. It is regulating spaces. It is making connections. So fascia is the primeval dimension of your innerness.
Yeah, I've heard you
Fantastic.
talk about the one, the two, and the third. That there's a,
Yeah, yeah.
it's something else. It's not how we
Yeah.
would traditionally see it, right?
And that's what I learned from the embryo, that also the so-called three germ layers they're always interpreted as three elements, to build a body with. And it are not spatial base building blocks. No, it is a threefold triune organization with a body wall, and an inner. And you have your visceral body wall, that's your inside, and you have your parietal, your locomotor outer wall, and in between, there you live, there you are. And then suddenly I could explain to people, to osteopaths, that's what Andrew Taylor still says when he says, in the waters and the fluids of the fascia, the soul is dwelling. Soul is not located in a brain or in an organ. Soul is dwelling. It is everywhere and nowhere. Your consciousness, dear Shu, is therefore not only in your head, it is everywhere. In your head, it can sleep and wake. In the rest of your body, it's always in different levels of consciousness, unconscious, subconscious, dreaming. But only in your head, you have the situation that sometimes your soul has to sleep in
Mhm.
order to restore, to form, to shape. And as soon as that is ready, again, your soul starts to figure by means of your brain. You think on your brain, not with your brain.
Yes, that's beautiful. Think on your brain, not with your brain. That's brilliant. That's a great statement. I'm going to quote you on that one. That's great. One of the things that you're saying that I think is fundamental with what I do as a practice with melt and what I
Yeah,
feel when I put my hands on somebody, I always talk about it as a frequency. And dare I be so bold to say that could the fluids and fascia actually be the chi that people talk about in Chinese medicine? We have
that's interesting.
yin and yin yi, so fluid and the essence of the body. That sounds like fascia to me. That
Yeah,
sounds like the
yeah,
fluids and fascia.
yeah.
And people are so focused on the fibrous aspect, the collagen. And I'm like, well,
No,
collagen
no,
wouldn't be anything without the fluids keeping it
no.
moving, right?
And then you come again in my polarity, because my polarity thinking, that's from Rudolf Steiner, that comes from Randall Stone, that comes from Andrew Taylor Still, is that always in the third, life happens in the third dimension, in the in between. So connective tissue is not connective tissue. That is one aspect. Connective tissue connects, yes, with the fibers and so on, and it
Right. That's
also
why we call it
creates
connective tissue.
and it also creates space.
Yes.
So there you come again with the middle, the rhythm, the in between. That is always of the two and never
Mhm.
the one. It's always the third dimension, what I call.
Yeah, I've been helping JC Gumberto. He created this 12 conference collection, trying
Yeah,
to bring a lot of his work into these simple conferences to
yeah,
make it more digestible. And in watching it, I was helping him compose quiz questions and putting this together. And I, every time I listen to him, I think to myself, my gosh, it must be so frustrating to be him and to be a surgeon who's done over 10,000 surgeries and then really start to look at this system more as an artist. And then really, I feel like I would have an existential crisis in how he describes fascia and the matrix of it, and also how our cells exist within this matrix and are reliant upon it to function efficiently, which I think for a lot of cell biologists would be
Yeah.
like a short circuit in their mind. So when in your work and how you would compare contrast it with what JC is trying to bring to the awareness, where are you guys similar and where do you feel like there's a separation in the ideas that you have?
Gimbato and me?
Yeah.
Well, I gave once a hub, webinar hub lecture or whatever. And my first words always are, there are as many faces of fascia as there are experts of fascia. I think that Gambato has a very particular aspect of fascia where he focuses on. Robert Slipe always focuses on the fascial layers and the tension. Um, your beloved Gil Hadley always focuses on the connective tissue connections. I focus on the spaces, on the blood as a dynamic fascia dimension. So
Mm.
it has so many aspects, but what it unites, what where all the aspects comes together in, that it's neither connecting nor separating or it is both. It is that is the principle of fashion. It's anatomy and it's not anatomy. It's also architecture. It
Mm.
unifies always, even in the biointegrity. I'm so mad about that Stephen Levine. You know, I was I was awe when I met biointegrity. I said myself, this is it. This is what I already searched for 30 years because believed in bones and dynamons. There are no muscles and ligaments. It is always a structure. So you have tension guiding structures and you have compression guiding structures. That's all. And then I saw the system. I saw biointegrity and I said to him, well, for me, it's clear. You know, our locomotor system is a system of bones and dynamons. And when you bring it together and when you make it dynamic, you have a locomotor system.
Well,
And
and I love that. I love that term of dynamins,
yeah,
and instead of ligaments, there's dynamins. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm sure people are now rewinding this, going, "What did he say?" So, will you explain a little bit more about this philosophy and this understanding of how this idea of ligaments is perhaps not quite right, or and even
no,
tendons is not
it's
quite
not.
right?
Yeah, it's not a concept. It was our experience when we started to dissect no longer the ligaments and the bones and the muscles as it was instructed by our anatomy book. We simply took the knife and said, okay, let us now we separate all the different tissues from each other. And then there came out that many of the ligaments that they describe in anatomy books and still describe in anatomy books, they do not exist. Many of the ligaments in the greater joints, like the elbow and the actually are not isolated strands of connective tissue. That would be a very inefficient invention of evolution to make bands that are only tensioned in one position of the joint. That is very inefficient. And we discovered that many of the so-called ligaments were actually extensions or from muscle tissue, so that the connection is not that you have two bones connected by ligaments and a capsule so that you have a joint, and that out of there are the muscles that move the joint. No, we thought that also the muscle tissue and the connective tissue always were in series, not parallel, no, not parallel to, but always in series. And then you get a dynamic ligament that can adapt in every position of the joint. That is far more efficient. And then you had to change your definition of your muscle because muscle is still in every anatomy book. It is said it's a contractile organ. If muscles were contractile organs, you could never do this.
Mm-hmm.
It is connective tissue. It is dynamic connective tissue that can change its length, its stiffness. It is, muscles are softening and releasing, are shortening and lengthening. They are constantly adapting, but they are the dynamic ligaments. So there you are.
Yeah, I
When,
think that's
and
all.
when you
That's
have that in
also.
your mind, you see that still most anatomy book depict the muscles in a wrong way. They move away the connective tissue, well, there actually is a kind of, yeah, dynamic situation where the ligaments are actually tendons or aponeuroses of muscles. And that's
Yeah.
far. Your annular ligament, it does not exist. I have been on the operating room with orthopedic surgeons to show them that the annular ligament does not exist because they didn't believe us. So we went into the operation room and we said, look, that is not an annular ligament. See, do you see how how the fibers are running? Oh yeah, they are not running like this. No, they run like that. Yeah, because it is an aponeurosis of the supinator muscle.
Mm.
That's what you cut. That's what you connect. And don't say to your patient that you corrected or repaired his annular ligament. You repaired his myofascial continuity of the supinator with an aponeurosis and so on. And that's good
That's
work.
great.
Yeah,
Say that 3 times fast. What did you do for me? You didn't fix
yeah,
my ligament? No, I did
but
not.
listen, that is all about science.
Yeah.
Science is seeing what you think and not the reverse. And they
Yeah.
always want us to believe that they do the reverse, that they gather the data and the phenomena, and then out of the data and the phenomena, they draw their conclusions. That's not science.
Yeah.
Science is having an idea, and it can be a paradigm, that can be a dogma or an hypothesis or a question, and you are looking for the facts in the body that are in harmony with that idea. And when the facts are in harmony with your idea, then many scientists says, well, I am right. No, the facts do not prove that you're right, because the facts do not give you right. Your interpretation is in harmony with the facts. That is science.
Yeah.
That's
I think
another thing.
there's also an issue, I think, especially I see it a lot in the fascial community, is working really hard at defining something, making a definition that is like, this is what it is. And I think to myself, that's the problem with fascia, is because it's a fluid system and there's so many components to it. Yes, it connects things, so we can call it a connective tissue. Okay, but it is a sensory organ. Okay, so how is it a sensory organ? And that, all of these sensory nerves living in it, and have we been looking at it that way? And now we want to call it a system, and it's a system of what? Stability, of how are we stabilizing, right? And then what other roles does it play? Because I look at the fascia and I feel like I have a much bigger picture, which is even more difficult to define, because if I'm talking about immune regulation, metabolic regulation, anything that relates to well-being, I would think fascia plays a leading role in
Mhm,
how our
mhm,
lymphatic system operates, on how our metabolic system functions, on how organs communicate with one another. Fascia is playing a role in all of it.
mhm.
And I think that's very difficult for science, because science oftentimes likes data and solid square things, like this is it, this is what it is, and we're all going to stick with this. And I think with quantum physics that kind of threw a lot of stuff up in the air, right? Where they're saying, oh, this whole idea of gravity, that's the big stuff, and then there's this quantum stuff. Well, that doesn't really match up with the big stuff. But how can the big stuff not match up with the small stuff? Because like the big stuff is made out of small stuff, so it kind of gets a little like, how can we all be okay with the physicists who are completely fine with the idea that gravity and the big stuff doesn't necessarily need to connect to the small stuff? How do we deal with something like that?
Maybe you can make the next step. And the next step is that out there is the universe. There's the macrocosmos with all its laws and all its questions, and there is no gravity, and there is no. Now they've discovered a particle that keeps the things together, and there is the microcosmos where also different laws and different physics is valid, and maybe we here on Earth with all the animals and the planets are the mesocosmos,
Mm,
where macro as well as micro comes to significance.
yeah, that's
And that
beautiful.
is why we live in gravity. We could not exist without gravity. And in the macrocosmos, they cannot find gravity. In the
Mm,
microcosmos, well, at the end, they found a particle, the Higgs boson, and that is the particle that keeps the things together because they needed something that well, maybe in our mesocosmos, in the reality we live in, there the macro and the microcosmos come together, interact, and make reality possible.
Yeah, that's good. There it is. And I mean, really, I think to myself, if I close my eyes, within my body is a mirrored image of the universe.
Yeah,
It's just a mini version of all of it. And yeah, I mean, I just wonder every time I watch something like Ancient Apocalypse with Graham Hancock, I think to myself, yeah, we do not have history completely spot on. I think there's a lot of stories that
yeah,
are out there that may or may not be true, yet we've been teaching that for uh, centuries. Yeah, and that definitely trips me out, because you are growing up believing everything, at least I did, believed everything a teacher would teach me or anything I read in a book. And there are many times now as an adult reading in new literature and going, my gosh, is this really the truth now? Because there's a lot of books in college that I read when I was in school, and they were written in the 1960s. And if you go to NYU or Penn State or any of the other big colleges, they're still reading a lot of those books.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and there's been so much new technology. I get it. Colleges don't have money to buy new books and whatever, which is why it costs so much money to go to college now. It's not that you're getting a great education, you're just paying to keep the heat on in the buildings. There's got to be a way where AI and this technology that is out there is going to uncover and answer questions that have been a mystery for a long time. And I think for
Yeah, yeah,
sure that's also going to occur with the human
yeah,
body.
yeah, yeah. And it would be very good for you if you would get more familiar with polarity thinking, because polarity thinking is creating future. I mean, we consider man and male and female nowadays still as a duality. But suppose it's a polarity. Suppose we need each other. Philo- Suppose we are meant to fulfill each other and to create in between something that is new, which is neither man nor female, is
Mhm.
as well female as well as male, the androgen. Suppose that the macrocosmos and the microcosmos are polarities. On their own, they are not anything, but together they fulfill, together they create the mesocosmos where we can live in.
Yeah, I mean that is the God honest truth, right? I mean, we need one another to get through this world.
Yeah,
Anybody
yeah,
who thinks that they need to go at it alone or they need to do everything on their own, it really is something that you learn is that we do really need one another because this is how we grow, this is how we experience and how we find love and all that other stuff. Yeah, what do you think the meaning of life is?
it is all about love,
Yeah.
because it's all about bringing together, shaping the space in between, breathing. Love is where it's all about. It's not about a fight of the existence, a war of the fittest, whatever. No, it's about getting together, about creating a new universe in which you have a well as well this as well that, and at the same time neither this nor that.
That's really
It's
great. I
about
mean,
love.
that's what I think so
That
too. I
are the
think the meaning
last.
of life is love.
I always say in my course, well, people, if you want to if you have to go an hour early because you have to go home, please tell me, because then I will whisper in your ear the last word, because the last word of my course is the most important word.
Mm.
And if you miss the last words, you might miss the whole story. And my last part in the course is about evolution. I have not an alternative for Darwin. Darwin is the Darwinism is, too one-sided, too reductionistic. It's only one aspect. There's another aspect. And that could mean that we are not a product of evolution, like we are not a product of our body. Maybe evolution is about us. Maybe evolution is about coming together of mind and body, of maybe God and man, whatever. So my last word is, it is about love. That's the last word.
Mm.
And that's, yeah. Do you hear any scientists talk about love? Do they study love?
No, I think that we all need to love one another more and talk a little bit more about it because that is, I mean, nothing.
Uh,
I say
mm,
that people think the opposite of love is hate. And I'm like, it is not. The opposite of love is fear. When you
yes,
act in a state of
good.
love,
Yes.
things go your way,
And
energy
love
passes
is the
through.
middle. Love is the connecting, the in
Yes,
between. There you are.
that's it. Fear
You
just
cannot
messes
you
stuff up.
cannot
If you act in a
imagine.
state of fear, you mess up everything.
You cannot imagine when I was 20 years old, I said goodbye to everything that has to do with my father. the
Mm.
church, God, religion. I didn't want to do with it. My father died in my arm at, after an evening when we, for the first time, really met each other. And since then, I realized that, so to say, that the polarity is not life and death. The polarity is birth and die, and in between there is the middle, there's the breathing, it's always in the middle, and love also. And I said goodbye to a religion of my father, and my father was so helpless at his deathbed because my father knew only about good and evil. There
Mm.
was no in between. His God would be correct or not. He should be good or bad. There was no in between. And then I met anthroposophy. And anthroposophy said there is not good versus bad.
Right.
Bad has two faces. Bad is too hard or too soft or too much of this. That is bad. That's not good. And the good is your way you find in between these two poles, polarities of evil. And that
Mm.
was so freeing for me. I have to find out what is good, and there is no choice to make it. This is. Don't have to tell me what is good. I have to find out what is good, and evil serves me to that.
Beautiful.
I need Trump so that I can realize what I do not want to be. Okay.
Love that. So, yep, I think we've already answered it, but I'm going to go ahead and and ask you the
Yeah, but
question
I
I
have to
ask.
finish.
Yep, I ask everybody at the end of this is I say, if you could tell somebody something that you know that most people don't know anything about, but if they did, it might very well change their whole meaning of life, their whole existence, what would it be?
That you are not made. That you are not the product of a set of two gametes. That you do not start as a cell. That would be the most important image. You are not made by someone else. You are not a possession of two parents. You are a unique being on this universe, and you start at conception. It is the first step in. And what is the unity of human being? The unity of human being is not a body. It's not a soul. It's not a genome. It's not a brain. It is your biography. And in that biography, what you bring to appearance, in that you are unique. This whole universe is filled with you. And don't forget
Well, on that note, yep, thank you so much for this
that.
conversation. I so
Yeah.
appreciate you. I look very forward to seeing you in March. I will definitely post this, and I hope everybody listening follows this and shares this with your friends. And join us on the next Anatomical Gangster, where I will talk with another very brilliant person about a complicated topic and break it
Thank
down.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you
And
so much.
I'm very happy that I could have this conversation with you. But
Well,
I really admire you. When I see what you do and how many
oh,
people you are familiar with and what you create and what is your inspiration. Well, that's a biography. Oh my God.
thank you so
Yeah,
much
yeah,
for that. I really appreciate that. Well, like I say, I look forward to seeing you and giving you a warm
yeah.
embrace and saying thank you for sharing your wisdom and
Yes.
your love and knowledge. I really appreciate
I
you.
love you. Looking forward to meet you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Love you too. Thanks, Shep. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I learned so much every time I read something from Yap or listen to him. And I hope some of you guys will join us in London at the first week of March. I'm looking forward to the embryo course, and you can see all of the information in the link below. Until we see you again on another Anatomical Gangster, keep your mind open, and I'll see you soon.